Hi guys, monitoring and evaluation written test questions and answers. I'm so glad you've come to this channel today. I'm your host Coach Alexander and welcome to M&D Made Simple. Now if you're here for the very first time, that is my name, Coach Alexander. I've been doing this for 10 years now and I've enjoyed every bit of it. So if you like monitoring and evaluation and you want to get updates and trainings and also hints in terms of M&E, please subscribe to this channel. Now I'm also offering the logical framework analysis guide. This is totally free. The link is in the description below. Please download it so that you can be able to get the maximum benefit, because as you know guys, the LFA is very important in everything that we do. So you have to make reference to it all the time, okay? That's fine. And another thing is that I have a special announcement to make. The works for the M&D guide for 2022 is underway, the beginner's guide. So please be on the lookout so that you get this book and have the maximum benefit from it. There's of course the 6 months coaching program. So for those of you who've not yet enrolled in this program, this is a very good program. You get one-on-one coaching from me every week, okay? So we go and interact on Skype. You tell me your problems. I guide you all along through the way on how to do M&E. I also give you some material. So please enroll in this course. There's nothing you're going to lose. It's only for 6 months and you get a wealth of information. Now, for those of you who know KP Islands and for those of you who may not know them, this is a M&D software developers company. Now, KP Islands is currently running a promotion for all M&D professionals to collaborate with their team on the same platform to collect data that can be exported as Excel or CSV for only $9.9 per month. They are also offering free access to the beta version of their analytics for a limited number of users who would like to continue working on the platform after the data collection. I strongly recommend guys that you take full advantage of this promotion to simplify your M&D processes, because you know the thing is that one, the registration is free on this KP Islands software, but on top of that you are going to use a software that's going to make you more efficient in terms of collection, data analysis, collection and reporting. Okay, so that's what I had to say about KP Islands. Now let's go straight to the questions and answers, okay? So give me just a few seconds. Hi guys, welcome back. Now, as you can see right in front of you, these are the questions and answers. So what I've done in the past, I'll just do the questions and talk about the answers, but not even list the answers down, okay? But in this particular case, what I've done is I've documented the questions and also have showcased what the solutions are to that question. Now I'm going to run you through this question paper. It's talking about the logical framework matrix. I know most of you are familiar with this matrix, and it's actually the heart of M&D because this is where we get the indicators from. So the question is asking you to develop an M&D framework matrix. Some people tend to confuse the M&D framework matrix with the LFA, but they are totally different things. Okay, so every M&D professional needs to know how to do this because it simplifies the way you operationalize monitoring and evaluation in your organization. Then the second question is asking you to develop indicator reference sheets for one indicator of your choice. Indicator reference sheets, guys, are also key to you carrying out your function. The reason is simple because indicators may be understood differently by different people, but you need to have a standard understanding of what those indicators are. So now let's get straight into business. If you want more details about this LFA, you can go to another website called toolsfordevelopment.org. They'll be happy to help you. And I also want to mention that sometimes I'll be visiting different websites on the internet, and I'll give my independent opinion about those websites. Whether it's good or bad, it's just my opinion. But if you have had a very good user experience with them, then you might as well go ahead. I won't stop you if you want to access their services. So I think Tools for Development is a good website, so you can go there. Now, this LFA is about, their overall goal is to increase the number of grade 5 to 6 primary students continuing to high school within 3 years. Okay, that is their overall goal. So now if you look at the indicators that they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 indicators. Okay, so this is the simplest form of logical framework matrix that you see as an example. I'm sure this was given to the public because it was a simple example, and that's why I'm also using it. Now, how do you develop the matrix out of this? Now, one thing you need to understand, the matrix will come in this form. Okay, I've already done the solutions, but what will happen is that you as an M&D professional, your concentration will be on this column here and the indicators. That's all. From this LFA, your concentration will be just on this column where there's the goal, outcome, output, and the indicator. So you lift these two things and then you form this table. So you get the goal column and the indicators column. But then on top of that, you need to add the definition, the baseline, target, result, data source, frequency, person responsible, and reporting. Now, if you've been following the past videos that I've done on the M&D matrix, M&D framework matrix, you discover that this is actually the template. And there's a template, there's a link to the M&D framework template that I had attached in my last video. So you can go and download that template. It's totally free. Now, I'll just run you through the highlights, but I would expect that you get this document yourself at your own time. The way it is here is that you have the goal and then you have the indicators. So you have to define, what does this indicator actually mean? All right, you define it there. So in this case, I had defined it. I said the percentage of grade 5 to 6 students continuing to high school means that this means it's the proportion of primary grade 5 to 6 primary students proceeding to high school expressed as a percentage. Okay, so that's how I defined it. All right, and then another thing is that you need to include the baseline. The purpose of having the baseline column is so that you can be able to make comparisons. So for example, if in year 2 of implementation you achieve a certain result, you can be able to compare and contrast so that it gives you a sense of whether you are making progress or not. The data source is where you're going to find the data. Essentially, that's what it means. So if you want to know whether there's been any significant change, where will you get this data from? The data source will be found from the records. That's what they tell you. You only get it from the student assessment records. All right, and then the frequency of data collection. Now, I want to talk about the frequency of data collection. Data collection has its own frequency depending on the level of results. So if you are going to do, if you are collecting for the highest level of the result, which is the goal, you expect it to be done at least annually. Or if it's not at least annually, at least after some considerable time has passed. Now, who is responsible for keeping the records? Okay, so we talked about the data. Who is responsible for collecting this? It's the teachers. And where do they report it to? they'll obviously report it to the project coordinator or M&D officer, because this is a project, mind you. It's not everyday schooling activity per se, but it's a project. So this data needs to go to the M&D officer or project coordinator. Now let's go to the next one. I'll do a few highlights. So the baseline in this case, when we talk about reading proficiency among children in grade 5 to 6, the average, so now this is how I defined it. It's the average numerical index value for reading proficiency among children in grade 5 to 6. So the baseline, okay, so now you notice that the baseline is empty. It's because I couldn't find any baseline information based on this LFA. But if you want, you can be creative. You can add your own baseline, because that's what creativity is all about. So the target is by 20%, increase by 20% within 3 years. So this is a 20% increase. The data source is the 6 months reading proficiency test using the National Assessment Tool. So basically, it's the proficiency test. That's where you're going to get your data. So now, like I mentioned earlier on, the frequency is dependent on the type of level of result. So in this particular case, since it's a lower level result, you would expect it to be done semi-annually. Okay. Now, I know your eyeballs have automatically come here. Now, I want to talk about sometimes what happens when certain indicators are phrased a certain way. It can also affect the frequency of data collection. Let's say, for example, when you look at sorry about that. When you look at the output, it says students who have finished a reading summer camp. Okay. Now, if you look at this indicator, number of students completing a reading summer camp, then you go to students who have finished a reading summer camp, and that's the definition. Now, when does summer happen? It only happens once a year. So for you to get this data, it can only be done once a year, even though it's at the output level. I was tempted to put quarterly, but because this only happens once a year, it means that you can only do it once a year, which is annually. So sometimes you need to be careful on the phrasing of an indicator to get an idea of how often you can collect that data. Okay, so I would expect that you read through this at your own time. You can download this. The link is in the description below, so that you can get the maximum benefit. Now, on the indicator reference sheets, I chose one indicator, which was number of parents helping their children to read at home. This is based on the LFA. Now, an indicator reference sheet takes the form of this table I've given you. It takes the form of that table. Now, you have to understand that the reason why an indicator reference sheet is there is because it's supposed to help everyone have a common understanding of how that indicator is defined. So for example, I did my own indicator reference sheet, and it states that using this template, you can see that, for example, the name of the indicator is number of parents helping their children. What is the level of the indicator? It's at output level, and this can be verified even when you go to the LFA. Okay, so you go to the outputs there, you find it. It's at output level. Number of parents helping their children to read at home. Now, the reason why this indicator reference sheet is so good is because it also helps you understand things like the unit of measure and also the data collection method. Okay, so it helps you understand how do you collect this data. So I've stated that you can use surveys, you can use interviews, and also the teacher records. So when you get this indicator reference sheet, if you're totally new in an organization, it's so much easier to get to be brought up to speed. I want to mention also that if you have 10 indicators, maybe before I go even further, let's count how many indicators there are. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 indicators for this project. So meaning that you need to develop 6 indicator reference sheets. If you have 10, you have to develop 10 indicator reference sheets. Okay, I hope you're enjoying this. Now let's go straight to the next question. Question 2, explain in your own words the step-by-step process of developing data collection tools. Believe you me, this is where a lot of people fail. You know, data collection tools should be aligned to the LFA. So these indicators you see here should be found in your data collection tool. Now there's a step-by-step process to do it, which I have outlined. So the first step, review the strategic plan or project document to identify the indicators. Okay, it even says to check for all the KPIs. So you need to review the document in order to see how many indicators are there and what are these indicators. Step 2, for each of the KPIs, determine whether this indicator is either a quantitative or qualitative indicator, or whether it requires primary or secondary data. Now, you need to do this because the qualitative indicators usually are those indicators which require people to give their perceptions, or it could be measuring issues to do with attitudes in a community, and we know that issues of that kind are difficult to measure. Quantitative indicators are easier. So because of this, you need to find a method that is agreeable. Step 3, determine the data collection method for each indicator. So for qualitative indicators, usually you can use focus group, observation, or key informant interviews, because you are trying to understand the perceptions of people. Okay? But for quantitative indicators, you can use survey or one-on-one interviews. But that is not to say that you can't use a survey for qualitative indicators. It's just that in most cases, you may be more aligned to do a focus group for qualitative indicators because they are quite difficult to measure. Step 4, develop the tool based on the KPIs identified and methods of data collection. So all you do, just develop the tool based on the methods of data collection that you've identified and those KPIs. Then step 5, test the tool. All right, so when you've done the tool, whether it's a questionnaire or some register, test it. Compare with the LFA to ensure that all the indicators that are listed there are answering the needs of the framework. Step 5, test the tool, okay? Then step 6, train staff on how to use the tool. Okay, so you need to give them some training so that they understand how to use the tool. Okay, and the reason, you know, one thing I can tell you is that don't just look at an individual and think because he's got a degree and experience, he doesn't need to be trained. Even the most qualified people need to be trained because, and we're talking about on the use of the tool, they also need to be trained because they might have their own understanding, but you as the M&A officer know exactly how to use the tool. Ask the trained staff to pilot test the tool in the field. That is step 7. So you ask them, you tell them actually, go in the field and pilot tests to see whether this tool is good enough or not. Now, the reason why they have to pilot test is also you want to understand what are the challenges. Should this tool be used, what challenges will you face if you don't make any changes? You also want to get their experience and know whether this tool is user-friendly or not. Step 8, based on the experience and comments of the pilot tested tool, make the necessary changes and launch the tool. So based on whatever feedback they give you, you need to make the changes to that tool. So I'm so happy that you took the time to look at this video. Please ensure to get this document. The link is in the description. And on a regular basis, this will be posting a material like this on a regular basis so that you get fully acquainted with some of the questions that may come. Okay guys, until we meet again, I've been your host, Coach Alexander, and see you on the other side.